I got a call from a family friend about 10:30, 11, telling me we had to go, evacuation. So I got in the car and we started to head out. But we were one of the late leavers. We were one of the late leavers. The town was already on fire. But mind you, I didn't know the town was on fire because I went out at 7 in the morning. And I didn't see any fire or any smoke in the town. I didn't see it anywhere. I figured we were okay. So, as everybody's trying to get out, our police are waving everybody around everywhere, trying to get out. I could see that I was heading into a fire tunnel. In Paradise, we're on a ridge, surrounded by canyons. Surrounded by canyons. There's only like 3 ways out. I think now there's 4 ways. There's a back way out. But there's only 3 ways out of Paradise. And leaving Paradise, it's 1 road, 1 lane. And it was a fire tunnel, folks. All the visual that you saw on TV, that's what we were going into. We were in a fire tunnel, surrounded by fire, surrounded by embers, black, pitch black as night. Mind you, the canyon is just right there. So if any of us on the road was leaning over, we would all have gone off the canyon. When you're driving in a firestorm, you think the windows are going to pop, gas tank's going to blow up, your tires are going to melt. These are the things on your mind. I started singing. I'm a Christian woman and I write songs for the Father, so I was singing the songs I wrote for Him, for the kingdom. Started singing. Gave me peace and it calmed me. I was fine. Then again, I also knew that maybe those windows might start popping. So I wanted to roll the window down. I wanted to touch it. I wanted to see how hot it was. I wanted to connect with it. I wanted to see this thing that was going to take me down. I wanted to touch it. Put my hand out the window, it should have been burnt. The minute I put it out, it was no more than 72 degrees. Praise the Lord. I had a Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego moment. The Lord was in the furnace with all. He said, I have you in a bubble. I'm going to get you all down. Just keep singing. So I did.
Hello once again to all those who come to the sacred groves, be you student teachers, that is to say members of the school, or be you visitors to the campus who check in at the Planetary Tantra Forum or stroll around the halls and corridors to see what you can find. This is the founder of the Sophianic School, John Lash, recording on the 5th of December 2018 from a loft in Flanders, Belgium. I have a message today to go out to everyone who is on the mailing list. You ought to know, you should know, that the content on Nimitta is only available to those on the mailing list. It's not like the case of my channel, Mandela Effect Decoded. During the time that I maintained that channel, I uploaded talks which were available to anyone who came along and stumbled upon them, but that is not the case here. So there is a limited number of people, a finite number of people, to be sure, who have access to what I'm going to say now. The message I have today is not about a world gone insane. No. It's about a world gone beyond insanity. Beyond insanity. And contained in this message is something that I have to say, something that's extremely significant to me regarding this moment in history. Now, what you heard at the beginning of this talk was a testimony from a YouTube channel called A Plain Truth, Plane, of a woman who lived in Paradise, California. And there she describes her escape from the inferno of paradise. And she recounts in a quaking voice, as you can hear, steady, but in a quaking voice, she recounts her impressions and experiences and how she reacted and responded to the mortal and horrible danger that she was facing. Now, this story is typical of others I've heard coming out of that event, which is ongoing, by the way. It's typical of other people who have recorded themselves in their cars fleeing through the tunnel of fire and praying to the Father God to protect them and get them to safety. I haven't heard any testimonies from atheists or Buddhists or Taoists or devotees of Sophianic animism, although I know there was at least one devotee of Sophianic animism who escaped that fire. So, why am I citing this woman's testimony? It presents an excellent example, an outstanding example for my case, that the world is not insane, it is beyond insanity. What this woman is saying is beyond insanity. You could say, if you want to really break it down and get, apply some Gnostic nuances, you could say the situation that she is in is insane. It is due to the agenda and the deliberate actions of certain entities who are insane. You could say that. I deem that to be an accurate statement. But the way that the woman is responding to what's happening to her is beyond the insanity that is being inflicted upon her. Hence, I invite you to capture and appreciate the Gnostic nuance in this meme, beyond insanity. There's a moral to the story here. There's a moral to be drawn from the piece of testimony that I've attached to the beginning of this talk. And the moral is simple, and it goes like this. You cannot get beyond the insanity of the world with more insanity. No one is going to get beyond the insanity of this world with anything but the highest sanity. And this woman, bless her heart, does not demonstrate the highest sanity. She's facing an insane situation, and she's responding through the filter of a belief system that she has received from the very same agencies who put her in that situation. They're insane, dangerously, criminally insane, hateful. That's the way to describe the Xenosh. Dangerously, lethally hatefully insane at their best, at the top of their form. She is one individual among thousands in that situation, hundreds of thousands in the region, and among millions across the planet who are now in the sights of an endgame scenario coming from the Xenos, coming from the insane psychopaths and enemies of life who have the power to do such things as burn down Paradise, California with directed energy weapons. So there she is, targeted by an agenda of genocide, targeted for a Holocaust, namely to be burned alive. The origin of the Holocaust is the mindset of the Jehovistic father god off planet, the punitive deity. She is experiencing the wrath of that god, of the alien archontic deity, operating through its proxies. And how does she respond? She calls upon the archontic alien deity to save her. She cites biblical folklore that has come into her world from a culture and a civilization, if you can call it that. No, from a tribal culture far, far away in space and far, far away in time. And she cites the legend of 3 men who were thrown into a furnace, but they did not burn, which is a fairy tale from the Bible. I know that story well. I learned it in Sunday school. And she calls upon, with song and praise, she calls upon that biblical entity to protect her and save her while she is facing the Holocaust sent upon her by that entity. You figure it. I'll say it again to make it perfectly clear. The Holocaust this woman was facing is an action perpetrated deliberately by powers of insanity. But her response is another form of insanity. And in fact, the terms of her mindset, the terms of her belief system, have been dictated to her through the very same channels of evil and deceit and division that are currently playing out their agenda in California and elsewhere around the world. This moment in history, right now as I speak, and the entire duration of 2019 is like nothing else before. I advise you, this moment in history is like nothing else before. Many of you who've paid attention since 9/11 to the truth movement, what I call the truth core, many of you who've educated yourselves in how evil is perpetrated in the social order, who is behind the evil, many of you who have taken the time and made the effort to figure out what the fuck is wrong with life on this planet, will be familiar with the assertion that the perpetrators have a plan. The perpetrators have a plan. How many times have you heard about the New World Order, globalist psychopaths, and their plan, and this is their plan, and they plan to do this, and they plan to do that, and they plan to genocide the white races, and they plan to genocide the German people, which plan has been in effect for almost a century now. And they plan to do this and they plan to do that, okay? Well, this is not planning. This is execution. The moment of the execution of their plans has come. And it ain't gonna stop. It's not just a foray. It's not just a skirmish that happened in Paradise, California. It's not just an incidental event that's leading to the full implementation of their plan. I can tell you what I think. I can tell you how I see the situation today. And I can say with confidence that you are looking, if you dare to look, at the full implementation of their plan. The full implementation of the full plan is now materially and physically underway and out in the open. So mark that. Mark that on your agenda. Mark that it happened at the end of 2018 and that 2019 will show day after day, everywhere you look, evidence of the immediate implementation of their agenda of genocidal destruction, collapsing of society, enslavement of peoples in all nations, destruction of the greatest threat to them, which is the white race, and particularly white males, and on and on and on. Do I have to make the inventory for the nth time? I don't think so. If you want to make that inventory, you can do it yourself. Now, I know that some of you listening to these words will probably say, if you were here with me and we had an occasion for some back and forth, sadly that is not the case, but I can anticipate some of your responses, and some of you would say, well, listen, John, they've been implementing their agenda for a long time now. For instance, fluoride in water, GMO foods, rigging of the banking system, and degradation of the morals of society through Hollywood, through the music industry, through the educational system, and so forth and so on. Of course, anyone who's been working on the problem is going to say, yeah, they've been implementing their plan for a long time already. But I would have you consider this. You know, there are white people in South Africa right now, today, as I speak, who face the risk of suddenly looking out the window of their farmhouse, say there's a farmer and his wife and 3 children, and seeing a group of black men coming toward them with machetes, screwdrivers, blowtorches, electric saws, you name it, with the intention to murder them. And they will first rape and torture the teenage daughter. They'll boil the children. Who knows what they'll do to the mother? They'll have the man watch all this and maybe leave him alive, or they'll burn his eyes out with the blowtorch. This is a reality that's happening on the planet today. Now, if you were facing that kind of situation, I think you would agree that would be reasonable to say that someone is acting on you openly with murderous hate and force intended to harm and kill. Openly, flagrantly acting on you in that way. Well, certainly, if you're a white farmer in South Africa, that's exactly what you may be facing, and many thousands and thousands of them have faced that horror. But I'm here to tell you that as a member of the nations, that is all of the races on the planet exclusive of the Xenosh, who deem themselves to be apart from the other races, to be superior to all other races, supreme over them, and even in some respects not of the human species, but of a higher species. All of you who are not in the ranks of the Xenosh and their accessories are facing danger of the same degree that the South African farmer is facing, or you must think as if it were so. What's happening with the events in California is that the perpetrators are openly, physically, flagrantly demonstrating their murderous hatred for you. By putting fluoride in the water, by introducing, conditioning 3 or 4-year-old children to sexual perversity, by lying every which way from Sunday in the media, by doing all those things, they are attacking you and showing their hatred for you in a certain manner. But you cannot compare, say, the release of a Hollywood film, which is intended to destroy the morals of the nations and lie to them about history. You cannot compare that act with the kind of act that you see in California, where people are being immediately physically confronted with a threat to their lives. But that's how it is. And it's come to that point. The murderous and hateful insanity of the Zenosh has come to that point. And I don't think they're going to back off. I don't think they're going to de-escalate. On the contrary, I think that it can only get worse. Much, much worse. Now, my message about this moment in history, however, is not at all a message of pessimism, of despair. It certainly is a warning, and I've delivered the warning here in the first 20 minutes. So let me change my tack a little bit and talk about some other aspects that are unique to this moment in history. And as you listen to me now, I invite you to make the matters that I present a priority of your attention every day. So integrate them into your conscience and your view of life, your worldview, to the best of your ability, and as you are so inclined. First thing I want to point out, the first fact concerning the uniqueness of this moment in history, is the existence of a mystery school. Now, the mystery school of Nematta is not perhaps what one might have anticipated by pondering or considering the notion of a, quote, mystery school, unquote. I remember very clearly back in 1998, I think it was, when I went to Marion, Massachusetts, to talk at the Marion Institute with Graham Hancock. I remember vividly what happened at that event. I chose the occasion of that talk to introduce the subject of the Gnostics and who they were, and to tell those 120 or 30 people gathered there, it was a packed event, to tell them about the mystery schools and the mysteries and what the mysteries really were. And, you know, I will never forget the reaction that that produced. There was a palpable vibration of euphoria at that event. People came to me, they were literally trembling. Some people were drooling over what I said. Literally. Salivating. That's how deep the physical impact of my words went into the participants of that event. And on that very occasion, which was probably November 1998, 20 years ago, is that it? One of the members of the Marion Foundation, Marion Institute, as it's now called, senior members and sponsor, came up to me and said, "Oh, John, this is such a breakthrough. What you're giving us is so precious. We must now establish, a mystery school for today. So there you have it. As it turns out, I'll let you know, if you don't know already, that with all my faults and flaws, my standards are extremely rigorous. And the people in that place and setting had neither the qualifications nor the correct disposition to proceed. So I could not proceed with those people at that time. Now, in fact, I could not define what the mystery school would be at that time. I could not at that moment have said, yeah, let's do it, and it's going to look like this, and then I gave them a description of nimitta, which is only a portal to the mystery school. I couldn't do that. At that time, and in the ensuing years, when the topic of creating a mystery school in the modern age came up on the table, it always suggested some vague notion of, like a Zen meditation center or a self-realization, a Yogananda self-realization foundation campus where you're taught meditation and students do these different exercises on that campus. And there are all the accoutrements of spirituality and all the decor that goes along with it, the ceremonial behaviors and the decor. And that was sort of the phantom cloud floating in the air whenever anyone pronounced the word mystery school. Oh, it was going to look like that. I think Jean Houston founded a Christian-based mystery school, and I think she went around the country at that very time. Late 80s, 90s, yeah, presenting events and group meditations and guided meditations and so on. And that was her form of the mystery school. Well, no way, no way. That is not the mystery school. That is not what a mystery school looks like. Nimitta is what a mystery school looks like. And those 12 classrooms and those 3 vocations and the other units in nimitta, including the terma and the turtan and breaking noose and the projects booked for nimitta, all those facets of the mystery school are part of a massive fail-safe program dedicated to preserve your sanity. Nimitta is not only an educational cult which you run and you maintain in your life, not in the virtual, but it is also the platform for that sanity which can survive beyond the insanity that is demonstrated in the belief system of the woman speaking at the beginning of this talk. It could be said, and let me say it myself, John Lash calls nimitta a mystery school. Or what is it really? Well, it's just a pretext that he's created, a structure that he and a handful of people have constructed that allows him to unload all of his work on people, the result of all of his studies and research and practice all through the years. Now he can just unload it off on people through these various classes and courses, right? And charge for the opportunity to learn from what he has learned, right? Well, you could say that is true, But look at it this way. I've been operating at a professorial status probably at least for the last 35 years. So imagine if I was a professor, tenured professor, receiving a professional salary, university level, postgraduate studies, And imagine if that situation, the professorship of John Lamb Lash, lasted for 35 years at acceptable level of salary. Well, what do you think that would have earned me? Well, I haven't earned anything from this, except when I practiced astrology, which is a trade, and except now and then when I gave a seminar or I gave a lecture somewhere, which was not very often. And I don't earn anything from nematta either. You have to know that all the revenues that come into nematta are for the preservation and building of the school, to preserve the facilities of the school, and to improve what the school offers. I said at the beginning, back in September on the 18th, when my cat Rumi died, that this is a beta launch. All of the courses are not organized into blocks and summarized and custom designed with revisions and additions and corrections to get out to you now. But they will be, Goddess willing, they will be by spring. And in February, there's a conference happening with my close allies to pull together Celestics and launch Celestics, which will be, what is the word? You could say a co-program, a spin-off if you want. Celestics is a kind of spin-off of my work. Celestics is in itself is a huge undertaking. So what you have looking at you in the mystery school is the full magnitude of the richness and diversity of what one man learned in his life, being on the mystical path and having the disposition to dedicate himself to certain studies, certain investigations. When you look at the list of, say, 16 primary units, picture the professor standing in front of you, and then do a little special effects trick on the professor, the way that you see they do with trick photography, when first there's just one person standing there, and then in an accordion effect, that person is duplicated into what? 16 different people. There could be 16 different professors heading each one of these courses. Why do I tell you this? Because you need to recognize this. No, so that you can recognize what is a mystery school. How is it possible that such a thing can be and be offered to you, not just to attend, but to run. You run it. You don't come and take meditation courses and go away feeling better about yourself and your spiritual connection to the universe. You're in nematta to enrich yourself and to learn and to preserve the sanity of the human species, to preserve the innate sanity. So when you picture that visual effect of 16 professors duplicated out of the one professor, don't think that it's anything to my credit. It's not about me, because the Maitreya is not a person. It's a process. That is the process. The multiplication of that one professor into 16 entities is the Maitreya process. And it's only the Maitreya process and its complementation with Bodhima, the mother of the Bodhisattvas, that could produce anything as wonderful and astounding as nematta. I want you to live from this day on knowing that it starts with me, but it's not about me. It's about you and me. It's about the Maitreya process and your role in it, should you choose to accept it. Okay, I don't want to go on and on about nematta, but I do want to emphasize that it is a unique and outstanding achievement of this moment in history, and that fact should not be disregarded. Finally, my last word on nematta I could offer to you in the form of a navigational metaphor. You know how much I've used the navigational metaphor, and one of the roles I play is the role of the nav. So you have the entire GNE of 140 or so talks and a great deal of text on nematta free, okay? And the nautical analogy, the nautical metaphor, is a powerful teaching tool that I have used, and I would love it if I'm remembered for that, and if I'm known for having used that tool in the way that I use it, navigation by the stars. But in a final reference to that navigational metaphor, I would say this. In the moment of great devastation and wreckage that we have now, it's as if the great ship of humanity has, been driven onto the rocks by evil forces. There's a shipwreck of the human species, and nematta is the lifeboat. It is the fully equipped lifeboat for getting past this horrendous event. Now, there may be in the water flotsam and jetsam. There may be life preservers here and there. There may be parts of the mast that are floating. There may be wooden chests floating in the water that people can climb on, and in that way be safe from drowning and perhaps find their way to the future of sanity and the sanity of the future. Everything else that people would rely on for that purpose is just flotsam and jetsam in the tide. But nematta is a fully equipped, fully crafted, navigable lifeboat. As the inceptor of the school, it matters to me that you think about it in the same way that I do, you see. And I can assure you that I consider nematta to be proof of Sophia's correction. It's a very great fact that I recovered the Sophianic narrative, that the Sophianic narrative is still free on metahistory. Sophianic narrative will always be free. Planetary Tantra will be free. No one owns the terma. I've said these things many times. The existence of nematta as an educational platform and an educational cult, I like to call it that, is proof that Sophia's correction has been achieved if you can maintain it. It's like Ben Franklin said when he came out of the First Continental Congress, we've given you a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. So, see if you can keep it. And as long as you keep nematta running in your life, not in the virtual, then you will be secure in that aspect of Sophia's correction. I would call that the esoteric or elite aspect of correction. Now, as most of you know, I've often spoken of the criterion or the condition, the essential condition for the demonstration of Sophia's correction in the world at large. What would prove that Sophia's correction is happening in the social order across the planet at this moment in history? Not just in your intimate lives, not just in what you share by being in the school or following planetary tantra, but to everyone else out there, those who don't know anything about the Gnostic message and the Sophianic way of life. What would be the proof that Sophia's correction is reaching into that realm of human experience today? Well, there was a time when hotels used to have keys to the doors, actual keys, instead of a card. And the proprietor of the hotel had something called a skeleton key. So say there were 40 rooms in the hotel, and each of the guests had his own key. But then the proprietor of the hotel had the skeleton key, which could open all 40 doors. So I offer you the analogy of the skeleton key, and I ask this question. If the skeleton key could open all of those doors, could it also lock those doors? If I needed to go into room 27 when the client wasn't there, the client had left and locked the door, okay, I use the skeleton key to open the door and go in and check the room, and then when I come out, can I relock it with the skeleton key? Well, let's assume that you can lock with a skeleton key. There is a lie on this planet that is like the skeleton key lock. And it locks all the other lies in place. Now you know, there are many, many lies operating in the world. Everywhere you look, there are lies. Lies about the economy, about education, about what's happening in current events, about politics, food, air, water. Everywhere you're confronted with lies. There are very many, many lies. And a good many of the people on the alternative media who are pretending to expose those lies are themselves lying. People like Faith Goldie and Tommy Robinson. They're lying at least by omission, and probably even more seriously as well. You could go around to each one of those lies, and you could unlock it like you would unlock a door in the hotel without the skeleton key. You could jiggle the lock, you could play with the lock, you could use some device, and you could unlock all of the rooms in the hotel. But as long as you didn't have the skeleton key, the whole hotel could be locked down again with one key. There is one key lie that locks down all the other lies. But wait, it gets even worse. It's not merely a problem of being lied to, of there being lies everywhere you go. The greater problem is that the lies are believed. You know, there are many lies being told about the California fires. And those lies are believed. It's an absolute lie that the California fires are natural and they have not been planned and they are not part of a systematic program to burn out the residents of certain areas of California and clear the land so that it can be reclaimed for projects which have already been slated on the books, which projects are to the benefit of the Rothschilds and other multinational corporations. It's a lie to say anything but what I just said about the California fires. Anything else is a lie. That they were accidental, they were caused by high winds. Oh, this is a great one. Proof of global warming. It's proof that anthropic global warming is making the atmosphere warmer, and the proof of that is these tremendously hot fires in California which melt automobile engines and so forth, like you saw at 9/11, right? DEW evidence. That's a lie. The problem is, of course, it has two aspects. Lies are being told. That's a problem. But the greater problem is, those lies are being believed. So, the sad story is, and you've heard it 1,000 times, or 100,000 at least, you know, mainstream news puts out lies, and the majority of people in the population of the United States, for instance, believe those lies. So what's going to show you the effect of Sophia's correction in the world at large is not an absence of lies. The liars won't desist. That's not going to be the evidence of her correction. The evidence of her correction is a change in the tendency to believe those lies. You see? What can stop people believing in all the lies, the many complicated, devious, disguised, insidious lies? There are so many of them. It's like being in a spaghetti of lies. The lies will continue, but the lies have no power if people cease to believe them. What is going to cause people, what event could have the effect in the minds of the mainstream of just ordinary people that would immediately, radically, and dramatically stop them from falling for all the lies that are inflicted upon them? Is that even possible? Yes, I believe it is. In fact, I know it's possible. I am certain of what I'm going to tell you now. There is one lie that is so unique and outstanding that you can compare it to the skeleton key. Just as the skeleton key can lock down every room in the hotel, every door, and unlock every door, the skeleton key to the lies, were it to be seen as the master lie, would release the masses from believing in all the other lies. Or it would at least provide the condition for that momentous turnaround of the human mind. Never before has humanity, in any culture or civilization in any age, faced such a challenge, which is also an opportunity. Why do people at large continue to believe lies when there is so much evidence to the contrary? The power of the lie depends, for its efficacy, on the believer. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so you've heard it said. The lie is in the eye of the believer. If people stop believing in these lies, then they would be futile. Wishing for the lies to stop, wishing for those who perpetrate and propagate the lies to cease and desist, is ridiculous and completely unhelpful. That is not going to happen. Suppose there was a pathological liar in your family who also happened to be a banker and a pedophile and an arms dealer. And that pathological liar had succeeded in many years of conning the people in the family with his lies and his deceit. Well, the moment that one member of the family ceases to believe his lies is the key moment. Because at that moment, the whole structure of lies is at risk of collapsing. There is a massive structure of lies operating in the world today. And to bring that down, only one thing is required. It only requires seeing one lie as a lie and standing up against that lie. Doing so would not be merely a victory against that single lie, but it would be an event that affects the willingness to believe other lies. You see? The other lies, which are myriad and manifold, which are legion, the lies are legion, succeed due to people believing in them. You have to change the situation and solve the problem at the level of belief, not at the level of the origin of the lies. You can't do anything about the origin of the lies. Not at first, anyway. What would change the human tendency to fall for lies, what would alter at a profound level the gullible tendency of the goy to believe lies that are told to them? What would change that? It only takes one lie to be recognized as such, and it would change everything. So I maintain, as I have before, that were that lie to be overthrown in a way that affects the mindset of the mainstream, then her correction would be proven in the world at large and in the realm of ordinary life, including all those millions of people who do not know the Gnostic message and do not have the opportunity to follow the Sophianic vision of life. You know, the mindset of the Xenos and the globalist perpetrators is terribly baroque and insidious. And a sane person can never understand the thinking of an insane person, especially someone who is criminally insane and bent upon evil and devious deeds. Nevertheless, I can say on this count that the mentality of the perpetrators is pretty straightforward. Basically, the way they play it is, if we can get them to believe this lie, we can get them to believe anything. So, the very great fact that they can propagate so many lies successfully in the world today is not due, as I said, as I'm trying to explain here, to the strength of those lies. It certainly is due to the media mechanisms and channels of communication they have for enforcing the lie. Certainly, I'll give them that. But those lies persist due to people believing in them. When people stop believing, those lies will collapse. So the way they've rigged it is, we'll get them to believe this one lie, and that will so affect them psychologically in such a bad way that it will cripple their response of disbelief or refusal to believe, and they will go along with the other lies that we propagate as well. This is how it works. Now, of course, with this one supreme and outstanding lie, they have to put a lot of effort into maintaining it because it is the skeleton key equivalent to the whole lockdown system. And how do they do that? Well, they intimidate and threaten people, and they go after people, and they put laws in place that make life extremely difficult for anyone who would stand up and say, I don't believe that particular lie. It's not a lie about the Civil War. It's not a lie about the Boer War in Africa. It's not a lie about the Opium Wars in China, although there are many lies about those three wars. But if you were to unlock the lies about those three wars and 30 others after that, such as Vietnam, it would still not have the desired effect I'm getting at here. The desired effect is, let's say, to restore the setting of disbelief. What has happened to the Goyim is that in their gullible minds, that's another issue, of course, why they are gullible and how that works to the advantage of the perpetrators. But in their gullible minds, there's a setting of disbelief. Some people call it the bullshit meter. That setting of disbelief has been so damaged that it doesn't function for many people. But even a damaged function can be reset. As I see it, Sophia's intention in her correction is to reset the disbelief circuit of the human mind so that people will stop believing in lies. And the reset begins with that one lie. If that one lie were to be challenged openly, in public, in the mainstream, even against all the threats that are in place, the threats and measures that are in place to enforce that lie, if it were to be challenged openly, then there would be a reset in a sufficient number of people in order to produce correction in the social order. And what an event that would be. You know, I can sense what that event would be. I can picture it. I can picture people in the street hugging each other and sobbing with joy and relief to have seen the belief in that lie crumble openly and publicly. I can see what a momentous catharsis that would be. Can't you see that? But as long as that one lie pertains, it operates like the skeleton key that locks down and holds in place all the other lies. Likewise, inversely, it can be the key that unlocks the other lies and liberates people at large from the prison of their mistaken beliefs. This moment of history in which you're living carries the opportunity for that to happen. And I'm not talking about it happening in the remote future, my friends. I'm talking about it happening soon. And I'm pretty certain that if it doesn't happen soon, it won't happen at all. And those of you who have found refuge and sanity in the Socratic way of life can go forward in life and live in correction in your own way. I advise you to get together, first to buddy up, then to form small groups or clans, and put yourself in a place of safety and refuge. No one is ultimately safe. All it takes is a nerd with a laptop to program in certain coordinates, and a DEW weapon in the nose of a drone or in the capsule of a satellite can send down a beam into the little enclave where you are living, somewhere in the Appalachians or somewhere in the remote areas of Canada or wherever you are in the world. No one is safe from this. That's why I say, I urge you to think and act as if you were the South African farmer with those black men knocking at the door, knocking down the door. The one other thing I would bring to your attention about the skeleton key of correction is this. Why is it that way? Why is it that one lie about the narrative of World War II and World War I? It's really a lie about a long narrative. But if you want to encapsulate it and put it within limits, you can say that it began in 1850 and it developed until the culminating moment of the First World War and then the Second World War. So it's about 100 years from 1850 to 1945, right? Although that lie, as it is told today in Hollywood films and TV movies, was not foisted upon the public until about 1971. So 45, 55, 65, that was a generation after the end of the war. Then the propagandization of the war atrocity narrative went public. But the war atrocity narrative was always operating in the First and Second World War. It's something that you may note if you ever get into a conversation or an argument on this point, and you're saying to someone, well, this is the narrative, these are the facts, these are what the Germans really did, these are what they didn't do, you know, citing the facts, citing, you know, certain historians, And then in this conversation, you are met with an objection. Well, what about all the hundreds of books that say that that narrative is correct? And one thing that you can point out at that point in the conversation is that you can put it in the form of a challenge. You can say, I challenge you to go and find any historian who supports the official version of the narrative of World War II. Show me the book they wrote on the history of World War II, and show me anywhere in that book where they talk about atrocity propaganda in war. And you will find that the historians who support the official version of the narrative do not include in their account of history the history of atrocity propaganda. Now, recently I heard Monica Schaefer talking, and she quoted someone that I'd never heard of before. And the quote went something like this. It was a quote referring to the events of World War II. And the individual said, well, we've just managed to win a tremendous war of atrocity propaganda, and we're going to go on winning it even better. I mean, that comment, I've got to trace that down. It's in an interview with Monica Schaefer on the History Reviewed website. That really says it all, you know. Did the Xenosh win World War I and World War II? No. What they won was the war of atrocity propaganda attached to those events. So when you find out that the atrocity propaganda was untrue, when you find out that it was inverted, when you find out that the actions that were attributed to a certain group of people were actually being perpetrated upon those people by the group who was attributing atrocities to them, when you find that out, then you're in shock. And this is a good shock, because it means that your disbelief circuit has been reset. When your disbelief circuit is reset relative to that one particular lie, it resets it for all other lies. All other lies. And that's what's required for correction. Why is it important from the viewpoint of the Aeon Sophia, the Aeonic Mother? Well, I'll speak now as a Gnostic, and I'll give you the Gnostic intel that no one else can give you. I've often used the expression of the divine experiment on earth. You can use it as a metaphor if you like, or you can take it literally. It works both ways. So what is the divine experiment on earth taken literally? Well, you have to use your imagination and figure what it is from the viewpoint of those who initiated the experiment, those who designed the anthropine genome and who initiated this experiment. What is their purpose? What is the design of the experiment? The culture in the Petri dish of the biosphere of the Earth consists of a spectrum of races. The anthropos or Rome is not a race. It is a species that differentiates itself into races. So the essential conditions, the primary or fundamental conditions of the divine experiment concern the differentiation of the anthropos into races and the behavior of those races relative to their environment and relative to each other. How does that work out? Well, how could it work out? Ideally, how could it work out to the benefit and well-being of the members of those races? Well, it could work out in a symbiotic society, in a world of mutual aid. That's the ideal solution to the divine experiment. The ideal outcome, I should say. Therefore, the differentiation of races is essential to the success of the experiment. Now, just recently, someone announced that there is an event taking place December 11th in Morocco where leaders of nations are going to meet, and they're going to sign a global pact on migration and refugees. Now, the sick, psychopathic control freaks who are Xenosh or accessory to Xenosh, who are pushing forward this pact, make it clear in no uncertain terms that this pact includes the enforcement of punishment against hate speech. And it defines hate speech as any objection to migration and refugees. That is to say, any objection to race mixing, any objection to flooding white countries with non-white races who have a completely different standard of living, different level of IQ, different moral and aesthetic values, different. So any objection against the flood of refugees and migrants, as they're erroneously called, any opinion which would be negative to the unconditional flooding of Europe by millions and millions of non-Europeans is going to be considered as hate speech, and it will be punished, it will be policed, and it will be enforced. All measures against any objection to migration will be enforced, consistent with this global pact. Take note that those who promote the refugee migrant invasion often cite the notion of the Kalergi plan, the notion being, this is a Marxist leftist dogma, that if all the races mixed into a cappuccino-colored race of a certain IQ level hovering at 80 or below, then there would be no conflict in the world. The dream or ideal of world peace would be achieved, and of course we know who's leading us to that ideal world of peace. So there you have another outrageous lie. The mixing of races into cappuccino-colored low IQ species is contrary to nature and contrary to the success of this experiment. The success of this experiment depends on the separation and differentiation of races so that they can cooperate across their differences. Or not. That's what makes the experiment interesting. They will cooperate or not across their differences. So the great lie, this great lie about race mixing, which is just a pretext for destroying the white, Aryan, Caucasian races, who are superior in their intelligence and achievement, as the record shows, that lie is also integral to the historical lie. Can you see that? The historical lie is about a narrative of which you cannot speak the truth or the true facts. It's a narrative about a certain people who decided to pursue eugenics, which simply means sane, salubrious, and healthy breeding practices in perpetuation of the healthiest, hardiest qualities of a racial stock. That's what eugenics is. That's not what you're told the eugenic agenda was in this narrative. You're told that the eugenic agenda was attached to a genocidal agenda. But those who promote the lie about the genocidal agenda perpetrated by certain people are themselves the true agents of that agenda. This is a terrible, terrible fact. And the day you wake up to it, you know that you are living in a nightmare scenario. So race is the key. racial awareness and racial differentiation and the acceptance of the difference of races as normal and healthy and worth preserving is part of the correction. The subject of race cannot be avoided with the turning of the skeleton key of the historical lie, releasing people from belief in the lie. Well, then the true picture of races and their role in the divine experiment will become obvious. Just obvious. Isn't it obvious? Who said it? Muhammad Ali said it. Hitler also said it. You know, sparrows don't mate with crows. And lions don't mate with leopards. Every species keeps to its own kind. That's the way of nature. And were the human species to violate that law, it would lead to the destruction of the human species. Since the Xenos do not consider themselves to be part of the human species, they're not concerned about destroying the human species. That's how their insanity works. They are really concerned about overturning that one particular lie. I mean, just go listen to Monica Schaefer on History Reviewed, and your jaw will drop, I assure you, when she explains the measures that are taken to prevent even the slightest implication of an allusion to a hint of a suggestion that there could be anything untrue about that narrative lie about World War II. So I've come around to an hour and 12 minutes, and I want to conclude by returning to the woman, I don't know her name, whom I cite at the beginning of this talk. Now I'd like to say something about the mindset of this woman. It may be that people of her persuasion who are Christians will start to rebuild their lives now, and maybe they'll form compounds somewhere in the wilderness of Oregon. Who knows what they'll do. But suppose she and a group of other Christians who are armed, they have to be armed, retreat into the wilderness of Oregon and form a compound, a community of 100 or 200 people, and there they're living, free of the system. And they sing songs of praise to the Father God. And they sing that old song. I think it comes from the American frontier or the American Revolution. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Well, I'm totally with these people, with such people, when it comes to the ammunition and the implements to fire it. But I'm not with them when it comes to praising the Lord. And I wouldn't want to be in that compound, even though if I were, and the compound came under attack, I would fight side by side with them to the death. But it would be a sad event for me, and I would be torn and tormented in my heart, because I would in fact be defending myself along with other people who are beyond insanity. And I do not want to be associated with people who are beyond insanity in the way this woman is. I spoke somewhere in some talk a while ago about the wonder circuit. I explained what the wonder circuit is in the neurological structure of the human animal. I'm inclined to say that within the wonder circuit there is a sub-function. There is something that would be called a router, a kind of a router. And this router is linked to the second attention of the human being, the imagination and fantasy. And this is how the router works. In the mind of the human creature, there is a circuit that routes their imagination to a supernatural guiding and protecting presence. So that circuit exists. And the router, you could say, has something like a scanner attached to it. So when the router is active, it scans the field of imagination, and it scans the field of all the things that have been taught and told to the human creature, to log on to some particular figure who then can be identified as the agent of protection and guidance. So, this circuit, the guidance circuit, which is a co-function of the wonder circuit, operates in every human individual. And it can operate on any chosen or programmed agency. In her case, her guidance circuit, her internal guidance system, was programmed to operate on the agency of the Father God of the Old Testament. The circuit works. The circuit is sane. You have that guidance circuit that allows you to identify a supernatural, overseeing, benevolent agency. You have it for your benefit as a human animal. It will validate whatever you scan into it. If you scan Jehovah into it, it becomes Jehovah. Jehovah becomes the guiding and protecting agency. If you scan Krishna into it, Krishna takes that role. If you scan some other deity from an African mythology or Japanese or Aztec mythology, if you scan Ishpapalotl into it as a warrior goddess, she operates in that role. Why? Because the circuit works. The circuit has been designed to work that way for you. It's unfortunate that people like the woman speaking here have used that circuit to identify an evil, alien, demented, and murderous entity as her guide and protector. It's more than unfortunate. I mean, it's extremely unfortunate. You know, Christians are pathetic and delusional and extremely unfortunate. But she may go to her death holding that belief, and it may indeed work for her and give her a sense of protection and guidance, not because the agency that she identifies is correct, but because the circuit works. The circuit itself is designed to provide you with guidance and protection. How much more powerful, then, will the effect of that circuit be if the Aeonic Mother is the agency you identify? When you identify the Aeonic Mother and the Shakti cluster and the realm of the Dakinis and Mahavidyas, the Devatas, which are all channels of her power, when you identify that with your guidance circuit, how much more powerful is that than choosing Jehovah or Liberace, or some holy guardian angel without a name, or who is this lead singer of the Doors? Jim Morrison. I suppose there could be a woman who used her guidance circuit to identify Jim Morrison as something like her holy guardian angel. So she could drive through the flames singing, "Baby, won't you light my fire?" And Jim Morrison would protect her. Due to the fact that the circuit works that way, and due to the fact that it is designed to deliver a sense of being protected and guided, and designed to effectuate awareness of a presence, it will always work in some manner. But consider the exceptional case of the aeonic mother. When she is the agency of protection and guidance identified by that circuit, then you have her presence in the circuit. You have her presence operating in the dynamic innate function of your psyche, and you have her presence right in front of you, underneath your feet, and all around you. And the aeonic mother, represented by the console of frequencies in the Shakti cluster, is the only case of a supernatural presence that satisfies those conditions. It is both present and operative in the psyche, and present materially, externally, sensorially. It is the only case that works with the guidance circuit in that way. In the first months of launching metahistory.org, I wrote about belief in the critique of belief systems, and much of that writing can now be found in the blocks and units under Metacritique. And way back then, seems like ages ago now, I proposed a simple proposition, which is, you behave as you believe. Now, if you believe a lie, the lie blinds you, and therefore you are behaving blindly. You know, the name of the alien demiurge, of the archontic demon god, Jehovah, one of the names of that entity is Samael, which means blind one. That refers to the fact that ETs, the embryonic type of ET, the bug-eyed premature fetus, gray alien, cannot see. So the eyes of the alien are not eyes. The eyes are simply lenses, like the lenses of a pair of sunglasses. And behind those lenses are radio frequency sensors. So the gray aliens do not see. They are blind. The effect of believing in any lie is that it blinds the believer. And this is one of the great goals of the Archons and the Zenosh count on the mass of the population being blind to their lies. And of course, the counterpart to that story is they live, which is often seen on the internet as a metaphor for seeing through the lies. The hero puts on the sunglasses and he is able to see the truth behind the lies to which he's being exposed. So I don't know what to say about Christians. I don't know what to say for Christians. I don't know what I can do for Christians except tell them that they are pathetic and delusional and they're a danger to themselves. And they can die believing that their belief system saved them, and many of them probably will. But I don't want to die in the ranks of such people. I said in a talk on the MED channel, it's so obvious that Christianity is a religion based upon child sacrifice. Just as the Old Testament is a narrative of child sacrifice, the narrative continues in the New Testament. Do you really believe that it is good for you to adhere to a religion based on child sacrifice? Well, that's what Christianity is. And I don't know where it's going to go. I honestly don't. But my highest desire is that Christianity would collapse along with all the other lies that can collapse in the process, in the great event of Sophia's correction. So on that note, I leave you for now. and wish you a sober and steady passage into the year 2019.